Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dillon, I'm your host. And today, guys, we are going to talk about really some of the common failure points of the traditional plan and spec process and really why some engineering firms fail, or really why contractors have so many dang RFIs on a project. And now some of this is also going to be just a peek behind the curtain, because even on some design build projects, there still end up being a ton of RFIs. But now the contractor is involved in that process and they get to see a little bit behind the curtain of what happens on a traditional plan and spec job. So that peek behind the curtain is as simple as the owner doesn't always know what they want, right? We're designing this project. We're going through the design phases, right? From schematic to design documents to construction documents, and then even into construction. And that owner might change their mind. Things in their process might change. Their manufacturing priorities might change. So new lines get added or removed during all of those processes and those projects. So it's really crucial to understand that it is not always the electrical engineer that is at fault, or why things are maybe not complete on the drawings. Some of that is totally the engineer's fault, right? They didn't get to it. They didn't allocate resources enough. They didn't care enough to double check or QA QC the drawings, right? That is totally on the engineering firm. They misallocated, misplanned, and did not have the right resources behind their projects at the right time. Totally their fault. Yes. In other cases, it is that the owner has not fully explained what they want. Those details aren't available yet to the engineering and design team. And so they're just going to be left off the drawings. Sometimes the owner continues to change and iterate things as we're going through design and those criteria. And again, either the changes didn't get picked up, they weren't fully thought through on the owner. Some of that is, placeholders to get us part of the way there. Like I talked about in another episode of the podcast, is in ordering gear, right? That we're just putting some placeholders in that, hey, we want 5,000 amp gear, but I don't know what all the feeder breakers are going to be in here, or I'm just putting placeholders for 1,200 amp breakers in this set of gear so that in 1,200 amp panels, and then we'll figure out what's actually in those distribution panels later and what the owner adds, or we're just going to fill them up with quote spare 20 amp breakers or whatever breaker sizes we decide to allocate in there. So because we know something's coming, just what it is and where it's going to go and what those circuits are going to be is to be determined. But we want to have all of that equipment there so that we're able to tie into those breakers, that we're then just waiting on wire and pipe, which should be readily available. And we're not waiting on circuit breakers, which again, 20 amp breakers should also be readily available at your local distribution center. But again, it's something that we don't want to have to wait on showing up for us to complete the job, right? So we're going to have all of that there as much as possible for when the owner decides ultimately what they want to put into the project. So a lot of these things in RFIs and heavy RFI projects, it can be one of two things. Either the engineer did not adequately prepare for that project, didn't adequately staff it, didn't have the right people on it. Just it didn't get done, right? That is one side of that coin. The other side of that coin is that the owner, doesn't have everything outlined that they want, right? And so we're, as engineers, trying to hopefully bridge that gap as best as possible, but we can't read the mind of the owner. We don't know what might be going in there from a manufacturing standpoint or anything else. And so there's some spaces that are just going to be question marks until we get, those final answers. Now, in a hotel, in a apartment complex, like there should not be a ton of RFIs, right? There's brand standards when it comes to hotels. Those should be very straightforward from the room layouts and things like that. Now, from like the bar aspect or other pieces like that of a hotel that is completely unique to that hotel, right? The bar layout, the restaurant, the kitchen equipment, that is going to be unique to that hotel and what they're going to serve and who's going to occupy that space. completely unique to that hotel. But for, the traditional or your standard rooms, queen, double, like all those questions should be able to be answered and done in the planning and programming phase of the project that the architect works through. And so for a lot of those types of projects, like there should not be a ton of RFIs, right? When you get into manufacturing or something that's completely bespoke, right? The first time they've built that, first time they've done it, there are going to, just by the nature of the type of project, be more RFIs, more questions, more things, more scope gaps that aren't completely covered. But for your standard, even for your standard office projects, there should not be a ton of RFIs, right? Those should be very straightforward. Same thing with your cookie cutter retail restaurants, like those guys have thought through what's going to be, every McDonald's, they have the same equipment. They have thought through what is going to be in that restaurant. Like, yeah, the size of the dining room might change, or the orientation of the building, or there's going to be some unique features of that site. But by and large, those buildings are all going to be very much the same. The kitchen layout is figured out. It is the exact same through all of their restaurants, right? There's no questions about that. Now, whether the architect put out the drawings correctly or the electrical engineer actually got to it and did everything correctly, those are all like design team RFIs, but from the owner, like in a McDonald's, like all those things are figured out, right? Those are all detailed. Same thing with Starbucks and all of your big chain restaurant retail stores. Those are very easily and well figured out and done. So those are the common failure points within a project. Is usually it comes down to not putting enough time and attention into the project, not having your list, not checking it twice. I mean, we're like Santa Claus figuring out who's naughty and nice here through a project. Like, that is it. You got a list, you check it off, make sure that everything is allocated throughout the entirety of the project, and you're going to be able to do just fine. But again, not everybody does that. Not everybody has a list, and not everybody's able to methodically go through and check it off. So when you do that, you won't have so many failures or RFIs or things that fail in your projects. So with that, guys, that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.